From the beginnings of human consciousness, a question echoes through generations, transcending cultures and beliefs. If God created us, who created God? This apparently simple interrogation carries in itself the essence of our search for understanding the incomprehensible. As Isaiah 55, 8-9 says, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, or your ways, my ways, says the Lord." Today, we invite you to a non-definitive but deep reflections on eternity, causality, and the nature of God that challenges our limited understanding. To understand the who created God, we must first examine the logic behind it. Our mind, used to a universe where everything has beginning and end, naturally seeks a first cause for all things. But can we apply this same temporal logic to a being that, by definition, be beyond time? The book of Genesis 1:1 tells us, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." This verse does not tell us about God's principle, but about the principle of our reality. Judeo-Christian tradition presents God as eternal, without beginning or end, as stated by Psalm 90:2. "Before the hills were born, or that you formed the earth and the world, yes, from eternity to eternity, you are God." This eternity of God is a challenging concept for finite minds like ours. We are beings that exist within the temporal flow, experiencing past, present, and future linear way. Conceiving something or someone outside this structure requires a leap of perspective. Theologians over the centuries have described God not only as the one who has always existed, but as the very foundation of being, the existence itself. As St. Augustine declared, God is not someone who came to be, but being in itself. The question about who created God is based on a concept known as infinite regression. If everything needs a cause, then the cause also needs an earlier cause, creating an endless cycle. Several religious and philosophical traditions have addressed this apparent paradox in different ways. In philosophy, Aristotle proposed the concept of the immovable engine, a first cause that moves everything without being moved. Centuries later, Thomas Aquinas adapted this idea to Christian theology, arguing that God is the unpaid cause, the beginning of the entire causal chain. In Islamic tradition, Allah is described as Al-Awwal, the first, and Al-Qadim, the eternal, indicating its existence without principle. In Judaism, God presents himself to Moses as, "I am what I am," Exodus 3:14, suggesting an self-sufficient and independent nature. Some currents of Oriental thinking, as in Hinduism, see God as an eternal cycle of creation and dissolution without defined beginning. For them, asking who created God would be like asking where a circle begins. Modern science also offers interesting perspectives for our reflection. With the emergence of Big Bang theory, we found that our universe had a defined beginning approximately 13.8 billion years ago. This moment marks the beginning not only of matter and energy, but also of time itself, as we know it. Physicist Stephen Hawking proposed that asking what existed before Big Bang would be like asking what is north of the North Pole. It simply makes no sense, because time started with the universe. This scientific view curiously echoes what theologians say for centuries. God has not been subject to time, but there is, in a reality, where our linear understanding of before and then does not apply. As the Apostle Peter says in 2 Peter 3:8, "For the Lord, one day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as a day." This verse suggests a God's perspective that transcends our temporal experience. This convergence between science and faith reveals to us something deep. Perhaps we are formulating the wrong question. Instead of who created God, we could ask, how can we understand a being that exists outside the limitations of time and the linear causality we know? Philosophers and theologians have proposed that God, unlike anything we know in the universe, is a necessary being. Its existence is not contingent or dependent on other factors. While all objects and beings in the universe are contingent, they could not exist. God would be the only being whose non-existence would be logically impossible. The philosopher Anselmo de Cantuaria expressed this in his ontological argument, suggesting that God is the one from which nothing greater can be conceived, a perfect and necessary being. Theologian Paul Tillich called God foundation of being, not just a being among other beings, but the very foundation of existence. As John 1:1-3 states, "In the beginning it was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were done through him, and without him nothing that was done." This text suggests God as the primordial source of all reality. This perspective fundamentally changes our initial question. Instead of asking, "Who created God?" maybe we should ask, "Why is there anything instead of nothing?" Recognizing God as the self-existing response to the mystery of existence. There is a fascinating paradox in our quest to understand God. We are using finite minds to try to grasp infinity. It is as if we tried to put the entire ocean in a glass of water, simply goes beyond our ability. The philosopher Immanuel Kant argued that our knowledge is limited to the world of sensitive experience, to the categories of time and space. Everything beyond that, what he called noumenal, remains inaccessible to the human intellect. God, by definition, would be in this kingdom beyond our cognitive ability. This epistemological limit is recognized in the Bible itself. In Job 38:4, God answers human questions with another question. "Where were you when I founded the earth? Tell us if you have understanding." This passage illustrates the incommensurability between the mind of God and the human. The Apostle Paul also recognizes this limitation in 1 Corinthians 13:12. "For now we see a mirror in a riddle, but then we will see face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know as I am also known." Our current understanding is how to look at a blurry mirror. We only see imperfect reflexes of the truth. Although human reason faces limitations by trying to understand the nature of God, other forms of knowledge can bring us closer to God. Theologian Blaise Pascal stated that the heart has reasons that reason itself is unaware of, suggesting that existential and experiential knowledge complements rational knowledge. The Christian mystical tradition, with figures like St. John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila, speaks of a knowledge of God that transcends concepts and arguments. This negative way or apophatic theology recognizes that God is better understood by what he is not than what he is. Proverbs 3:5-6 instructs us, "Trust in the Lord of all your heart, and do not stir in your own understanding. Recognizes him in all your ways, and he will straighten your paths." This passage suggests that trust and relationship with God surpass mere intellectual understanding. Maybe the question, "Who created God?" be less a question to be answered and one more invitation to recognize the limits of our reason and to embrace the mystery. As G.K. wrote Chesterton, "The goal of opening the mind, like opening your mouth, is to close it over something solid." The search for understanding the origin of God is not exclusive to Abrahamic traditions. In virtually all human cultures, we find attempts to explain God's nature and its relationship with time. In Hindu philosophy, the concept of Brahman represents the last reality, without a beginning or end, from which everything emanates and to which everything returns. Upanishads describe Brahman as Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, Bem ending, a reality that transcends any temporal causality. In Buddhist tradition, questions about the ultimate origin are often considered unanswered questions, or avriyakata. The Buddha compared these interrogations to a poisoned arrow. Removing the arrow, suffering, is more urgent than knowing who shot it or which wood was made. In Taoism, Tao is described as unnatable and imperishable, existing before heaven and earth. Lao Tzu wrote, "Looking, we do not see him and call him invisible. Listening, we do not listen to him and call him inaudible. Touching, we do not feel him and call him subtle." This universality of the human pursuit of understanding the transcendent suggests that we may be faced not only of intellectual curiosity, but of a deeply human intuition about the existence of something beyond materiality. Modern cosmological arguments offer logical structures to consider the existence of God as the first cause. The philosopher William Lane Craig popularized the Kalam cosmological argument, which follows three simple steps. 1. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. 2. The universe began to exist. 3. Therefore, the universe has a cause. This argument does not fall into the trap of infinite regression because it distinguishes between beings that begin to exist, like the universe, and a being that never began to exist, God. As Psalm 102:25-27 highlights, "From ancient times you have founded the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. They will all grow old like a roll. But you are always the same, and your years will never end." Some philosophers argue that the question, "Who created God?" contains a categorical misconception, how to ask, "What is the smell of blue color?" The question erroneously presupposes that God belongs to the category of created beings. Theologian Richard Swinburne proposes that God is the simplest and most elegant explanation for the existence of the universe, because postulating a unique, conscious, and almighty being is more economical than an infinite series of material causes. In addition to the intellectual debate, the question, "Who created God?" it has profound implications for our daily existence. If God is, in fact, self-existing and eternal, then he represents an absolutely unique reality, the ultimate source of all being, meaning, and value. Philosopher Paul Tillich spoke of God as our last concern, what gives meaning and fundamental purpose to human existence. If we recognize an eternal creator, our very existence acquires a meaning that transcends merely accidental or temporary. As the book of Ecclesiastes expresses 3:11, God has put eternity in the heart of man. This verse suggests that our spiritual restlessness, our pursuit of meaning and transcendence, reflects an intrinsic connection with the eternal inscribed in our very nature. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard argued that faith represents a leap beyond the boundaries of reason, not a leap in the dark, but a leap into the light that recognizes the limits of human knowledge and embraces the mystery of God. Recognizing an eternal God invites us to contemplate our own mortality and finitude with a new perspective. We are not only limited temporal beings, but creatures with potential for connecting to the eternal. Contemporary science, especially theoretical physics and cosmology, has offered amazing perspectives that relate to our fundamental question. Concepts such as multiversal, additional dimensions, and imaginary time theories propose reality structures that challenge our daily intuition. The physical mathematical Roger Penrose proposed the theory of cyclic eons, suggesting that our universe could be only one of many in an eternal cycle of expansion and contraction. Others, like Alexander Vilenkin, argue that even an eternal multiverse would require some kind of absolute onset. These modern scientific theories, however fascinating, end up leading us again to the original question: why is there anything instead of nothing? Science can describe the mechanisms of the universe, but it does not explain its fundamental existence. As Romans 1:20 states, the invisible attributes of God, his eternal power, and his nature of God have been clearly seen, being understood through the things created. This passage suggests that the very order and beauty of the cosmos point out beyond themselves to its eternal creator. The tension between science and faith is perhaps less a conflict and more complementarity. Two different languages addressing distinct aspects of the same reality. The question about the origin of God goes beyond purely intellectual rule and confronts us with deeply personal issues. What is our place in the cosmos? How do we relate to this possible eternal creator? What is the meaning of our temporal existence? In the face of eternity, C. Lewis, on his journey from atheism for Christianity, noted that his intellectual pursuit of God eventually revealed that I was not the one who sought God, but God who sought me. This insight suggests that our own curiosity about God can be an echo of a deeper call. Jesus taught his followers to address God as our Father, Matthew 6:9, suggesting not only a distant creator, but an intimate and personal relationship. This perspective transforms our abstract question into something much closer, not just who created God, but who is this God who seeks relationship with us? The philosopher Martin Buber distinguished between me-this relations, objectifying, and you-too relations, personal. Perhaps our approach to God needs to transcend intellectual objectification to a personal encounter, not just think about God, but experience his presence. We then reach the crucial point of our reflection, the fundamental paradox that involves our initial question. Maybe the question, who created God? Be in itself a product of our human limitation, of our inability to fully conceive of what it means to be truly eternal and self-existing. The answer is not to force God to fit in our limited mental categories, but to allow the concept of God to expand our understanding of reality. As Isaiah 55:9, just as the heavens are higher than the earth, my ways are also higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. When Moses asked God his name on Mount Sinai, the answer was simply, I am what I am. Exodus 3:14. This revolutionary self-deficiency points to an absolute, independent and self-contained existence, a being that is simply without qualifications or contingencies. The mystery of God's existence invites us not to a final response, but to continuous exploitation, a journey of discovery that goes beyond the limits of linear logic and connects us with the deepest foundation of reality. Our journey through this ancient question brought us not to a definitive answer, but to a deeper understanding of the limits and possibilities of human knowledge before God. Maybe the question, who created God, remind us that we are finite beings, seeking to understand infinity. This tension is not a failure, but an invitation to an intellectual humility that makes room for mystery and reverence. As the psalmist wrote in Psalm 8:3-4, when I contemplate your heavens, work of your fingers, and the moon and the stars you established, which is the man who remembers you, and the Son of Man who visits him? This passage expresses both human insignificance and our special dignity in the eyes of the Creator. Our search for understanding the origin of God can, paradoxically, approach Him, not because we resolve the mystery, but because we deepen our appreciation of its greatness and transcendence. We conclude not with definitive answers, but with an invitation to continuous contemplation, in-depth study, and the opening to the mystery that goes beyond our understanding, but it continues to call us to a living relationship with the eternal. Now that we have exploited this profound question about the eternal nature of God, I invite you to continue your spiritual and intellectual journey. Reflect. How is the understanding of an eternal and self-existing God transforms your vision of life, the universe, and your own purpose? The Bible tells us in Jeremiah 29:13, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me from all your heart." This sincere search is the true purpose of all spiritual restlessness. If this content has touched your heart and mind, share it with friends and family who may also be seeking answers to deep existential questions. Subscribe to our channel for more reflections on faith, philosophy, and spirituality. May the peace that exceeds all understanding keep your heart and mind as you continue your journey of discovery and faith.